Hello everyone, and welcome to Mr. Simplify's tutorials. In this tutorial, we are going to look at Karen Horney's Psychoanalytic social theory and Neurosis. Now, Karen Horney was a German psychoanalyst who contributed greatly in the fields of neurosis and psychoanalytics. Now, Karen theorized that the human society, cultural factors, and childhood are actually more important than genetic factors when it comes to developing personality and also in people developing neurotic tendencies. Although she was highly influenced by Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis, she rejected many of his observations and actually emphasized the importance of cultural factors on individual development. Now, neurosis is generally considered to be characterized by excessive anxiety and a degree of social disconnect. But Karen looked at neurosis as a distorted way, of looking at the world and of looking at oneself. Now, this distorted view is created because of the society that we live in and the culture that human beings have created in this world. Okay, now let's look at some important concepts elaborated by her, starting off with her psychoanalytic social theory. Now, according to Horney, human beings are not ruled by pleasure alone. Human development is actually based more around the need for safety and satisfaction. She believed that the major source of hostility and anxiety are our culture, or the society that we live in, and childhood experiences. She theorized that modern culture actually promotes competition between human beings, and that every person is either a real competitor or a potential competitor to everybody else. Very interesting. And this creates anxiety and isolation in individuals and also forces them to look at love and affection as solutions to all their problems. So they look for love not because they want to, but because they need to. She also proposed that the sum total of childhood experiences shapes up personalities very prominently. Lack of genuine love and care and traumatic experiences, in her opinion, can actually result in neurotic tendencies in people. Now let's look at the concepts of hostility and anxiety. Now, we spoke about safety and satisfaction to be basic human needs. It's more important for children, in our opinion, to be safe and satisfied when growing up. If parents actually demonstrate an unwillingness to love their children or start neglecting, dominating, or overindulging their children, they start developing basic hostility towards their parents. And if children start repressing this hostility towards their parents, it can actually create a feeling of fear, and it can actually create insecurities in the child, and the child can actually develop basic anxiety. Okay, so that's the difference between hostility and anxiety. So anxiety comes into the equation when hostility is suppressed, and this basic anxiety is the state where a person feels isolated and helpless. To protect against anxiety, the brain actually uses certain defense mechanisms, which are as follows. Affection. Now, this refers to people desperately seeking love and going to any means possible to try and get love for themselves, even if it means purchasing temporary companionship using material means. Submissiveness. Now, this refers to blindly believing and surrendering to certain people or institutions. Power or prestige. Now, this refers to dominating over and humiliating others to compensate for one's own vulnerabilities. Withdrawal. Now, this refers to emotionally disconnecting and withdrawing from other people to protect oneself from getting hurt. Okay? Now, if you're interested in learning more about defense mechanisms in general, we have covered that in a separate tutorial titled Human human defense mechanisms, and that was actually a concept elaborated greatly by Anna Freud. Now, we've looked into defenses adopted by normal people to protect themselves from anxiety, but neurotic people experience anxiety to a much higher level. Okay? Neurotic people can actually develop 10 different types of needs known as neurotic needs to protect themselves from anxiety. Now let's look at these neurotic needs as proposed by Karen. The need for affection and approval. Now this refers to their attempt to indiscriminately please others and to try and live up to other people's expectations to the point that they actually weigh their own selves down. The next need is the need for a powerful partner. Now, all human beings try to attract powerful partners for themselves, but neurotic people try to desperately attach themselves to powerful partners to compensate for their own lack of confidence. So there is a difference. The need to restrict one's life within narrow borders. Now, neurotics strive to maintain a low profile. They try to avoid the limelight and force themselves to be content with very little. The need for power. Now this is the other end of the spectrum, wherein some neurotics tend to exert power and control over other people to make themselves feel more secure. The need to exploit other people. Now certain neurotics tend to latch on to people who they can exploit, so they only latch on to them because they're easily exploited. And it's their own fear of being exploited that drives them to exploit these other people. The next need is the need for social recognition or prestige. Now, some neurotics try to combat basic anxiety by attracting attention and trying to be important. Okay? Now, the next need is the need for personal admiration. Now, some neurotics have an overinflated self-esteem and feel the need to continually be admired by others to actually avoid their own anxiety. Okay? The need for ambition and personal achievement. See, everybody sets personal milestones and want to achieve things in life, but neurotics look to achieve their goals in a way that they actually defeat other people who stand in their way. So they're ruthless in some ways. The next need is the need for self-sufficiency and independence. Now, some neurotics need to actually keep themselves away from others. They therefore go into a shell and work hard at distancing themselves from people they're getting very close to. So this is the need for self-sufficiency and independence. So it's not as positive a trait as it looks like. The next need is the need for perfection and unassailability. Now this stems out of their fear of looking weak and vulnerable. Now certain neurotics look to never make mistakes and be in situations which actually make them look less than perfect. This is the need that this refers to. Now, we now look at a concept called neurotic trends. Now, as Karen developed her neurotic needs, she observed that the 10 needs can actually be clubbed together into 3 categories that she called neurotic trends. So the needs were actually refined over time by Karen, and she actually noticed a pattern, and they can actually broadly be categorized into these 3 trends. The trends are moving closer to people. Now this refers to neurotics submitting to other people to protect themselves. Moving against people. Now this is a tendency to consider everybody to be hostile. Okay? And this can lead neurotics to be exploitative, aggressive, and exert power on other people. Okay? And the next trend is moving away from people. Now, moving against people and moving away from people are 2 completely different things, because this refers to their isolating tendency and their tendency to distance themselves from other people and from the society in totality. Okay? So moving, they can either move close to people, wherein they actually latch on to other people and become too dependent on other people. They can move against people, where everybody is a potential enemy, and they can actually move away from people, where they actually isolate themselves completely, so they never allow themselves to get too close to anybody. Okay, now these are some of the most important concepts covered, proposed by Karen, and for people who are more interested, there are a lot more concepts. This is again quite an in-depth topic, and for people who are interested in finding out more, the other topics that I would recommend that you do research on would be her ideas on the idealized self-image for human beings, the concept of self-hatred, and her opinions on her findings on female psychology. Because although she agreed with a few concepts that Freud came up with, and she was originally a follower of Sigmund Freud, she deviated away, and she actually heavily criticized some of his findings and some of his observations. So it's quite an important topic to do further research on, and I highly recommend that you do so. Okay. As always, I thank you very much for your attendance. I hope this tutorial was useful for you, and if you found it useful, please support this channel and all of the content in this channel by liking this tutorial, by using the comment section to recommend any other topics that you want covered in this channel, and please take extremely good care of yourself and your family.